you
Okay.
the actual button to record.
Gotcha. So it sort of opens it and then it does it. Yeah.
Exactly.
No wonder I've never. All right. So why don't we record it? And nothing we're doing today is very complicated. I'll just tell you that right now. We've talked about this quite a bit, and I've written this many times. I've written this many times in the inventory Yammer site, but I'm saying it now so we can say it over and over again. What we're doing here is not a training class. This is not going to be a training class. So if you think you're going to be trained on inventory, you've come to the wrong place. Okay? A training class has something like a teacher who knows the subject and students who don't know the subject, and you're trying to get them together. We don't have that. We don't have a teacher who knows the subject and students who don't know the subject. This is more like a work group, okay? And so this may be different. I mean, I wrote it up very clearly over in Yammer, but you miss what you're reading and you don't really notice this. But I have a good idea on how to use this inventory software, but I bet you I know 20% on how to use it, okay? I know enough to get us started, and so it's always easier to have someone to get you a little bit started, but we will quickly get to the point that we're all trying to figure out how to use it. What's especially true about that is that even if I knew a lot more, the big hole in what I know is how do we start using it? So the gaps in knowledge are how does the software work? And then how do we implement it into our publishing and into the college environment, hospital environment? You see, well, I only know 10%, 20% of how it works. We've got to struggle on how to get it so we know more about how it works. But then at some point, people are knowledgeable. All of us will have to show up at a publishing house and sit there and try to figure out how are we going to make this work at this publishing house. You see, it's a big difference knowing how software works and then how to really make it work in a real environment. You know the difference. I mean, they worked, Danny and Jan and Ray and Carl and Andrew worked maybe 5 years with Sun Systems before they got satisfied with a core that could be really rolled out like what we're doing right now. Things that we take for granted, forms and reports and configuration that we take for granted, took a lot of years to get right, you see. And so we're just at the very beginning. Does that make sense? Can I get an amen nod that you all understand that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is not training. This is not me knowing how to do inventory, me knowing how to do inventory in the church environment, and me now training you. Okay, like in past experiences, this is more of a work group trying to figure this out. And also one of the things that are motivating us is that we have a big need in the church environment for publishing houses to be able to have inventory systems. We have a big need for colleges and universities to have inventories, okay, and hospitals to have inventories, okay. So that's a big need in the church, and somehow or another we've got to solve it. And I'm not so sure that this inventory system is the right solution. But I believe everyone here, I don't know Vimbe, but I take Siri's word for it. I believe everyone here has the attitude they want to know all they can know about this software, whether you ever use it or not. I want to know every nook and cranny about the Sun Systems software, and so that's the reason I'm interested in it, almost. So if we work on it for days almost. If we work on it and we work on it and we work on it, and we decide that it is not an inventory, and it's not something the church needs. Yeah, I won't feel like that's a waste at all. Okay, I'm happy just to know how things work. So I think that's more of our motivator. Okay. All right, Cindy, are you about to say something, or did you keep the microphone off? Okay. Good. Okay. All right. Excellent. So we're all clear on that. So we're struggling, and what our goal is with these meetings is to get us working as a group on this problem, and to get us into the software so we sort of know how it works, how it's supposed to work, so we can do our own exploring and so forth. Now, especially for Bimbe's point of view, the rest, I think everyone else knows this, is that you know that the main Sun System software is very complicated, okay? All this stuff with analysis codes, analysis dimensions, and currencies and different currencies is very complicated. But it looks simple for our users, okay? Well, the reason it looks simple is that all these guys in the early 2000s, Jan, Dave, Danny, Carl, and Ray, they worked hard to make the forms and reports look simple, okay? Well, when we get into this software that we're looking at today, your first impression is going to be, man, this is too complicated for the church. Well, it's because it hasn't had what you see today is not what the user will see when they cut it on. Because we will make forms and reports, we will hide functions and menu items that we don't want. Does that make sense? So I don't want anybody looking in here saying, whoa, this is too complicated, we can't make this work. And because, you know, we can't make this work, it's too complicated. But the users won't see it that way if we do our job right. The users will see oh, they click this button, this button, this button, you know, a form with only the information that they need, and you'll see what I mean as we go along. Okay, so let's get started. And we have two sides, okay? Did someone join us? Oh, Innocent is coming.
Hey.
Welcome, Innocent.
Thank you so much.
All right, nick of time. The technical part. We had sort of warm up. Okay. Now, there are two sides to the software. Okay. Two sides to the software that we've got to keep straight. The first is this straight inventory. All right. Now I'm going to share. I'm going to change my cameras here a little bit. Let's see if we can change this. And Siri tells me that you can see this screen okay. All right, can you see my screen all right? All right, and so the two sides to the inventory that we have to learn is the inventory. All right, you see what a bad writer I am. Inventory itself, and then the second side is
the mic.
Is
Sorry.
That right?
You need to focus on that part because it's
the image is blurry.
Yeah, now it's fine.
Is it okay now? I've
Yes.
got settings on this camera that I'm still learning. Okay, so we've got inventory and keeping track of the inventory itself is what we have. And then the second half, which we'll do in another day, is the concept of movements, okay? Movements. And so I could take this piece of paper here, and put it over, and we'll have another class on movements. So those are the two things we have to learn. is how to keep track of our inventory and how to keep track of movements, how to do a movement. All right. So our first thing is inventories. Movements are when inventory moves. Okay, is that simple? All right. Inventory moves when you bought it, when you move it from one location to another, and when you sell it. Those are all movements. You change it from one location in the warehouse to another. You change it from one warehouse to another. You see, when you buy it and you bring it in and it goes to one place before it gets inspected and it goes to another place after it's been inspected, those are all movements. When I identify a inventory that it is now tagged to a sale, that's done with a movement. Okay, everything about the inventory changing status is a movement. But before we go to movements, we just have to learn how to take care of the inventory itself. This is the inventory sitting there on the shelves. Okay, we're all clear? Okay, now the inventory itself, I hope I can draw this. Okay, so this is sort of like the inventory, and with the attributes that go on the inventory, we can have as many attributes as you want. Okay, you name it, we can keep straight up. We can keep it straight. You know, the attribute like the amount of those items you have. We'll talk a lot about amount in a few minutes. You know, color,
size, weight.
Right. Okay. A big one that is involved with inventory is the units. Okay. Let me just talk about units for a minute. You know, before I went into Home Depot, which is a home supply place here, and I had something, picked it up on the shelf, and it was supposed to cost about $1. I go to buy it, and it rings up for $20. Well, what had happened was that I had ended up with one outside of the box. So when they scanned it, they thought I was buying a whole box load of them. You see, so the units of measurement for the item is important. You know, is it a dozen? You know, is it a case? In the Adventist Book Center, you know, they sell books by the case. They sell books individually, you see, and we have to be able to say, oh, this is how many cases we have, and this is how many individual books we have. And so it's the units is a big deal. You know, how much does that's the sales unit. Is it sold by the dozen? Is it sold by the gallon? Is it sold by the pound? Is it sold? What is the unit? Okay, a very common one will be each. Okay, the unit is, so each book is what we're dealing here. We also have, we need to keep track of wholesale price. What did we pay for it? Wholesale. Okay. And then we have selling price. And we can have 2 or 3 selling prices. I won't draw them all out here, but we can have a selling price for when we sell it to a call porter who is then going to resell it, or when we're going to sell it directly to the public. We have several selling prices. We can sell it. We can have a selling price in one currency and a selling price in another currency. We have selling price. So we can have a whole pile of attributes here. Now, these attributes are all connected. Okay, not these attributes, but the inventory itself is connected to all kinds of classification tables. Okay, so we know how. Let's see if we can think of a good example. Well, we know how a transaction can be coded by who and function and on and on. Well, we have the same sort of thing where we have a whole pile of classification tables. For example, what warehouse is it in? Okay, what warehouse is it in? And then what location within the warehouse? And so sometimes this could be like this. And sometimes when you talk about inventory, it could be a direct attribute to the deal here. Sometimes you can have this so it's not going to the warehouses, then you have warehouse, and then you have location. I'm trying to erase that line. If I can find my right paper towel here. Okay, so the item is in a location, the location is in a warehouse. Okay, depending on if that's the way you want to set it up. Okay, if you have all standard warehouses, then you would set it up different. If you have a different warehouse with different locations, this way. All right, then you can have the type of item. Okay, so you can have, let's call it a zone. Okay, now someone could say this zone belongs in a warehouse, and so it could be that you have a line going like that to a zone. So a zone is a bigger categorization than a location. Okay, so you have a location like you have a location is bin 63 tier 48. Okay, and row 9, aisle row 9, bin tier 23, zone 4. You know, every warehouse has a different way it makes its shelves and tags its shelves. That's what location is. But a zone could be something like, it needs to be in the frozen food zone. It needs to be in the health food zone, or it could be a book zone. Okay. Then you could have. I'm just going to run out of places to draw these things in, is that you can have categories. Okay, you have categories. You have Spanish books and English books. Okay, there's practically no limit to these categorizations that you could have. Okay, not only do they have a lot that are built in, and we're going to see those in a few minutes. Not only do they have a lot that are built in, then they have 10 that we are familiar with that we can create ourselves. All right, so all of us in here have created fun, function, restriction, and we know those 10 analysis codes that we know so well, right? Fun, function, restriction, resource, who, I'm trying to see if I can name them. Flag, project details, we know those 10, okay? Well, those 10 there are many more analysis code types in Sun Systems. I think it's unlimited, okay? But we have created those 10 and hooked those 10 to transactions. The limit wasn't on the amount of analysis codes we could have. The limit is on the amount of analysis codes that could be hooked to transactions. Does that make sense? Got to get a nod if you're with me? Mm-hmm. Okay, good, good. Mm-hmm. All right. But there's a lot more out there. And you could have 10 hooked to addresses, and 10 hooked to customers, and 10 hooked to descriptors hooked to suppliers, and 10. Well, one thing you can hook 10 to is inventory. Okay, so we can create 10 analysis dimensions. Siri, do you wanting something? Oh, did I knock it?
We lost Siri.
I'm getting messages from Siri, but I don't. Are you okay, Siri? I think he is gone.
We lost him.
Okay. Can you guys still see the screen okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, now, so that's the environment we're going into. It looks overwhelming. When you get in there, you're going to say, man, this is confusing, because so many of these things have already been set up. Okay? And not only do we have those that are set up, we can have as many as we want set up that limit and modify and describe our inventory. Okay? It doesn't stop. You know. All right, now, the interesting thing is that these things can also, they not only are descriptions of the inventory, they can also control the movement, which also controls the JV. Okay? So that is, we can have the debit for the expense being made, and the debit that is being made, the account that is being debited, can be different depending on what warehouse sells it or what zone sold it. Okay, so an item could be tagged as health food, and it goes to over here in zone or category, and it will go to a different expense account, cost of goods sold account, than if it's tagged book. Okay? So not only can you control the bookkeeping from the item, you can control the bookkeeping from these categories. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that's the big deal. So we're going to look at the program now and get a sense of how all this is going to fall together. All right? And there's a couple things that there's one thing that we need to keep track of is on items before we get over there. Okay, let me do another one. Is that we can have, this is an attribute, big attribute comes out here so I can have room to write, okay? All right? So we can have a,
Sorry, we cannot see that part, Dr. Mac.
what part?
That the one in the right corner. That's the reason I asked if we can switch off the light.
Oh, it's not seeable?
Yes. No, it can't.
So you can't see that?
Yeah, no.
Okay. Well, let's see. See, the light is funny because oh, that's this. Oh, I see where that's not that light. I switched off the wrong light.
Yes, that's the one.
Is that better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay. We got sort of.
And can you finally turn off everyone, because when you explain, we are seeing people in the camera, in the focus, instead of the explanation.
Ah, so you get it on go. Okay, so Eddie, I'm going to mute you, and Vimbai, welcome. We're glad you're here. You're beautiful there. All right, and I'm glad you're here. And I'm going to mute you, but unmute yourself anytime you want. Okay? All right, and all right, good. All right, so you can see here now. I think you can. All right, so we're just coming over here. This is another attribute. All right, now this software was made for I'm willing to say, as far as inventory control, is there's nothing, this software can do anything. Our problem, because it can do anything, will be to harness all that power and eliminate the power that we don't want. Okay? That's the challenge. It's not that it can't do something, is that it can do anything. And a lot of stuff we don't want. For example, what if you have an inventory that you want to control by serial number? Okay? That is, you want to know every item that goes out by serial number. Well, in the church system, I can't think of that happening. But what if you also wanted to control your inventory by expiration date? Okay? So one item over here could be expiration date. Now, at first you say, we don't need to track it. We are going to sell our books, the oldest books we're going to sell first, right? Isn't that what you learned in school? Sell the oldest books first. You know, first in, first out type thing. Well, that's not what you're going to be doing in the hospitals. When we implement this in a drug environment, a pharmacy, they've got to manage expiration dates. So they're not selling the latest first. They're selling the first to expire first. And when they talk about their inventory count and how much inventory they don't have an item that's just called, I don't know, super duper aspirin, but they have super duper aspirin with an expiration date of such and such as one inventory item. Okay? And so they have another super duper aspirin with another one, and but they do want to see how much super duper aspirin they have. So it's not like they're just completely separate inventory items. So if they want to answer the question, they want our system to answer the question, how much super duper aspirin do we have? Well, we have 300. But also we want to be able to say, of our super duper aspirin, one batch of it expires at the end of this month, and another batch of it expires at the end of 2 months. Okay? So all of that kind of things that you never thought of before in inventories are there. And so we have to learn as much as we can about the system and then start eliminating the stuff that doesn't relate to the church. That we don't need. Okay? So that's our challenge. So I'm going to switch cameras here now, because I know you want to see me. All right, actually, I guess I don't really need to switch camera. Now I'm in the dark. See, you see it? There you go. It's Halloween. All right, and then, all right, so I'm playing with my camera because I'm in the dark. You see that? This. All right, and we go now to sharing my screen. All right. I've got to share better than that. Oh no, let me just share my screen right now. Let's see if we can't get this thing going. I should have had all this ready. Okay? Are you seeing my screen okay? Now you're going to have to give me, since I can't see your faces anymore, you're going to have to give me verbal feedback.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, good. All right, now, so we're over here. Now, when you're using this software, when you're setting up the database, Gerardo will continue to help you set up the database. When you set up the database, you have to switch to PK1. Okay? PK1 is the business unit that has the inventory in it. Now, most of you know what PK1 is, but let's remind you, PK1 is the sample database coming from Infor. Okay, it's the sample business unit coming from Infor. So just like we have ADA and I forget all the ZAD, the sample databases that we've used in Sun System, Sun Plus, well, this is their sample database. And what we are going to do is sort of reverse engineer its inventory setups as a way that we learn. We learn the way it works with their setup, but then we have to learn how to make it work the way they made it work. Okay? Now, in order fulfillment, which is inventory is part of, okay? Let me see if you're seeing things fine. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. So in order fulfillment, there are all of these different screens: inventory, purchases, and sales. Okay? Purchases is obvious. We're buying stuff to resell it. Okay? We're buying stuff, and the purchase order system is over here. We could set up purchase orders and so forth. And then it goes into inventory, which is accounted for on this screen. Okay? And then it goes into sales to record a sale. Okay? All right? And then that relieves it out of inventory. Now, so that's the process, right? You buy it, it goes into inventory, and you take care of it, and then you sell it. Now, we need to keep in mind, for you that are I don't know how we say it, but we have purchased 30 licenses, serializations, to run just the inventory portion. Okay? Now, we can buy a training license that activates sales and purchases and inventory. Okay? We could do that. But when you start coming up with plans for publishing houses, if you're working on a publishing house, we want to have the inventory functionality. That's the part that bothers us the most, okay? The inventory functionality. We want to keep in mind that's what we already have paid for. So we can implement this at a low cost for publishing houses if we are satisfied that it will work using the inventory serialization only. If we can't make it work with the inventory serialization only, but we want to include these other things, that's okay, but we need to realize that that's going to come with some costs to the church. Okay, now, so the three functions here is to purchase some inventory, hold the inventory, and then sell it. Now, so that leads us to this fourth thing here. So these four make up the new stuff that we're looking at, that we haven't looked at before. Okay? The order fulfillment part handles commonality between those three parts. Okay? Let's see if I can illustrate it. And this is not scientifically done. Okay? Picking. All right? Picking, now for you that are new to inventories, picking is the stuff where you go through the warehouse, picking up the books that were in the order and putting them in the box. Okay? And so the question is that a sales activity or an inventory activity? Okay? Well, it's over here in order fulfillment. All right? So you can say, well, it doesn't belong there. Well, I mean, you can maybe write in for a letter. Okay? There's no value in arguing about where it ends up. And so order fulfillment is sort of things that are mutual to all three of these groups. Okay? Inventory is stuff to do with just helping you with your inventory, but order fulfillment is where a lot of our functionality is. For example, and like I said, I'm not making this up. I'm just trying to teach it. I don't design this. Okay? Down here under item estimate, you see we're under order fulfillment, but down under inventory items is the item master. Okay? The item master is the main inventory setup. Okay, so if I had a new item I wanted to buy, put into inventory, we're starting to carry Steps to Christ in the softback edition, then it would be, that would be set up under item master. Okay, does that make, I'm not asking does that make sense, do you understand? It doesn't make a lot of sense because you think that would be under inventory for sure. If anything is under inventory, the items themselves being set up ought to be done under inventory. But if you think about it, the item is also being sold, it's being purchased, and it is being held. So it's over here in order fulfillment, sort of walking all three places. Okay? Does that make, you follow that? Could I get a feedback? You know,
Yes.
when you're doing a class like this, it's easy to feel like, well, you're all alone.
Yeah.
Okay. I need to figure out 2 monitors or something so I can see your smiling faces. All right. Now, all right, so we create the item there. So a major place we will work with is item master. All right. And then item characteristics and serial numbers and units of labels and measures. All right. And I didn't say this too much earlier. Let's see if I can go back here. Okay, this, let's see, share my screen, no. Hold on a second. Let me go back here. This is probably not worth going back to. All right, stop sharing my screen. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there we go. All right. And so this is ridiculous. You say, Mackie, it wasn't worth the trouble, but I want to go back for just 1 second to this. By the time I get there, I'll forget why I needed to go back. Okay, but here's the important point, and it's a little bit of complicated important point, is that if you're really setting this up, if we walked into a publishing house or we walked into a hospital and we wanted to set this up, the last thing you set up is that, the inventory itself. You've got to establish what are your zones. What type of zones do you want to use? What type of categories do you want to use? What type of warehouses do you want to do? You set up all of the peripheral stuff. What are the units that are available for me to use in my organization? So one of the reasons you've got to master all of this outside stuff before you get to the actual inventory item, okay, before you set up this. So let's say you're setting up how you want your inventory to be kept track of. Well, you got to hook, do you want to hook the zones to it? Well, you have to have the zones populated before you start trying to hook, set up this center part. So a lot of discussion in an implementation is establishing what should be these things on the outside.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Do you want us to see something that you write on the table?
Oh, no, brother. Yeah, I want you to. Yeah. Y'all
Okay.
Thank you. So don't worry about interrupting me. That's all right. So I'm going to start all over because this is an important point. Sorry, my fault. I'll get better at this. All right. So what I was saying was, it feels silly to repeat it, but it's such an important point, I want to make sure you get it, is that you have to implement from the outside inward. You have to have your warehouses set up before you start trying to configure what your inventory looks like. You have to have your locations set up, okay? Your zones, and your categories, and your units all have to be set up first, okay, and understood first. So when you, and all of these miscellaneous ones, do you want to keep Ellen White books separate from health books? Do you want to keep, you know, these are the categories that we can have as many categories and dimensions we want to keep our frozen foods and separate from our canned foods and our health food store. So when you show up, that's the first conversation you have, okay? So when we get over here, okay, I think probably what I will do is this. I forget it. Okay, so I'm going back to sharing my screen, and you can.
Mac?
Uh-huh.
So if I am following you, you are telling us that the big main task is define the big context, the big picture where we are working with the inventory, no? Define the structure that is going around all the essential items in the inventory, no? That's it?
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, but
And
is,
so
do we have any checklist, I mean, mandatory attributes like locations or whatever? Because I'm thinking maybe for just a simple school that they want to keep maybe a plain list of the just code and description and the amount of any item. Maybe you don't need all different
right.
attributes to a warehouse, location, sons, or whatever. So, but even in that context, do we have any list of the mandatory fields or attributes or whatever you name it?
No, I don't think so. There's no mandatory that I know of, especially none coming from the church. You know, I don't know what you get into when you get into the into your local region. You know, like the government rules and stuff like that. But there's nothing that I know of, and basically it's all about practical management. Now, so one aspect of looking at what the attributes should be is managing the physical nature of the inventory. You know, where is it? What warehouse is it in? Whose is it with? Now, at first, this warehouse thing, if you're first listening to this, you're thinking this warehouse is irrelevant. Doesn't every place in the church just have one warehouse? But not necessarily, because you could have each of your call porters being separate warehouses.
Mm-hmm.
You see, so don't quickly to say, oh, we don't need to worry about warehouses, we only have one. Well, actually, you may have more than that. Or you may have 2 or 3 major warehouses and then locations. Instead of being a shelf number, the location may be the call porter that has the books.
Mm-hmm.
You see, so there's all kinds of possibilities here.
Yeah, because I was thinking what you told us at the beginning of the speech about hiding to the final user the complexity of the inventory system. If that is the case, there is not any mandatory attribute or whatever, so I have to customize for every implementation what they will see access, no? What they will see, what they have control, what they will need. So there is not a standard implementation.
That's right. There's not. There's not. Our goal of our work group here is to establish somewhat of a core. Okay? We don't have to go too crazy because every place's inventory is going to be a little bit different. But a good example, for example, I cannot think that we would ever need serial numbers. You know, we might have batch numbers or something, but I just don't know that we're selling things that are such high value. We're not selling jewelry, we're not selling cars, you know, but so we would hide serial numbers from the screen of the users. Okay, and they would never see it. The controller may be units of measure labels. Somebody needs to have access to that, but maybe not. Maybe the person implementing it would do such a good job that they would never again, units of measure labels would be like by the pound, by the dozen, by the case, a case of 50, a case of 25, if you never need it anymore. So that would be hidden, you see. And,
okay, I see. Thank you.
Yeah, and so all kinds, this screen could be 90% of what's on the screen would go away. For example, value books, okay? We would not have value books running because, well, none of us know how to use it. So we just hide the value book. Actually, the value books allow a different price book for different customers, okay? So you could establish a value book, a price listing for a certain type of customer or so forth. And so your journal entries look it up for that type of customer, looks up the price for that customer, okay?
Hello?
And so forth. Okay, so over here in inventory, all right, we can see, let's see if I can find it right here. We have warehouse.
Sorry, Dr. Mac.
Warehouse.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
Okay.
I would like to go back to the process that you were just describing before. We need first to implement the warehouse. The second part is the locations, and what is just below, because we can see it after the location. What is supposed to be there?
Okay, well, that would be, those were just general, there's nothing really written there. Those were just blocks without any total. So the first thing you would do, all right, and I think I'd started explaining something and then stopped. The first thing you would do when you sit down with an organization is to think about what information they need to help them with the physical management of their inventory. Okay, well, that goes from here. Then we give it to a call porter, and we've got to keep track that the call porter has it. Or we have this stuff over here. We've got to keep track of it carefully because it has expiration dates. Or this stuff needs to be kept in a frozen area. Or this needs to, we need to be able to find this on the shelves, and we have the individual books sitting on one part of the inventory warehouse, and the cases of those books sitting someplace else. The exact same book. So we have plenty of them, but we have two, and so those would be the type of things you'd first find out when you sit down with the organization. But then the next thing that are attributes that you would want to keep straight is things you need as far as doing the bookkeeping. Okay, it doesn't have to do with the physical nature of the asset, but it has to do with the bookkeeping you would like to do. Okay, so if you don't somewhere have your categories for your bookkeeping, then you're not going to be able to do your bookkeeping. So, for example, do you want all your cost of goods sold to go into one account? Okay, or do you want your sales of health food to go into one account and your sales of books to go into another account? Okay, you follow that? So you need to have categorizations so you're able to make that distinction when you prepare your movement. Okay, if you don't know what they are, then if the computer can't tell the difference between a book and a health food, it's not going to be able to make an entry putting them into separate bookkeeping accounts.
Okay.
The same thing's true with inventory accounts themselves. Do all of your inventory go into one account called inventory, or do you want to keep some of your inventory in an account called books and another inventory account called health foods? Okay.
Okay.
So first thing you do is figure out what type of attributes do you need to do the physical management? And the second one would be, what attributes do you need to do the bookkeeping? Okay?
Okay.
What type of information do you need? Okay? And then the third would be to facilitate. So we've got physical management of the asset. The second one would be the bookkeeping. And the third would be, what type of information do you need for sales, for your salespeople, for the sales process? So like, what color, what size is it, what language is the book in, and so forth. Someone looks it up. When they're looking up, they've got an inquiry. How many Spanish steps to Christ do we have? You see, you need to be able to look it up. You know, that makes sense? So when we sit down with an organization, we'll think about those three aspects and make sure that we have the attributes captured somewhere to facilitate those three different needs. Okay?
Okay.
All right, now, so here we can have warehouses. Okay, so the easiest to see is warehouses. And remember, warehouses don't necessarily have to be physical buildings. They could be the colporteurs. They could be, well, let's just look here. So there's the warehouses. So we have a warehouse set up, and this is real simple, okay, super simple. All right, so here are in our PK1, you can see, did I do that too fast? Okay, so it's just, we're very familiar with this type of screen, okay? And so the warehouse code, and this is all the warehouses that have been set up. We have one in Berlin, Houston, LA. We have an in-transit warehouse, okay? This is valuable here to us so we can see that warehouses can be something different than a physical building. It could be a colporter. We could have one place where we put it when it has one static category. It could be like work in process in a publishing house, okay? And so we have that. Now we have the ability, so you set up is real simple. You see, we got the address, the name of the address code if we want to set up an address for the physical warehouse, okay? And these are attributes about the warehouse down here, okay? Like, for example, the pick lead time. How long do you have to let them know something before they can pick it, okay? How often in that warehouse do you want to calculate a physical inventory in that warehouse? How many inventory counts do you want to have in a year? These are mutually exclusive things. That is, you set this, you won't set that, okay? So if you put down how many counts do you want to have a year, you don't have to put down here, I want to count everything in the warehouse every 30 days, okay? These, you know, one key. And then, and it's possible to have analysis codes on a warehouse, okay? So this is wheels within wheels, okay? So, you know, just like we have 10 transaction codes, who, fund, function, restriction, flag, we have those 10s. Those 10, we can have 10 on the inventory, and we can have 10 on the warehouses, okay? So if we're talking about colporteurs, we might want to have the analysis codes on what type of colporter this is, what country are they in, or something of this sort. So this is about the warehouse and analysis codes concerning the warehouse. All right. Now that's not the furthest out group, but I showed you that first so you could see it, because the furthest out group is that you can have established groups of warehouses. Okay, so this is wheels within wheels again. Okay, they don't have any set up here, but if you wanted to group all of your warehouses in a certain country, all of your colporteurs in a certain country, would be a group, okay? The warehouse setup would, you know, when you establish a group, you can assign a warehouse to that group, okay? And does that make sense? And so the furthest out circle is the warehouse group, then one step in is the warehouse itself, and then you have the next one in is inventory zones, okay? The inventory zones may be something like Ellen White books, history books, evangelistic books. That would be physical zones within the warehouse, though. So you want to be a little bit careful about those examples. Might not be the greatest. The most classic one would be warehouse zones being like books, canned health food, another zone being frozen food, okay? And then within the zones, you have inventory locations. Okay, so you can just see here, let's click a zone, inventory zone, so we can see what they look like. All right, so they have a bonded, a type of warehouse, a bonded zone. Okay, you can look that up later on, what a bonded zone is. A chiller, what goes into refrigeration, what goes in the hardware section of this PK1 example, and then hazardous. And mass is a whole type of the mass is part of the PK1 example. Okay, mass is, they're selling GPS type antennas for boats and stuff like that, in the example. And so this has special way it has to be stored. It has physical requirements are different, so it's over in the mass zone. Okay, so you can see it's just a matter of setting them up. All right, now notice on the zone, okay, we probably had this on the others and I didn't notice it, but notice the count code, okay, that we can control our accounting from the zone, okay, so if it's a health food, it goes to a certain account. If it is a refrigerated food, it goes to a separate account. How much are we making on our frozen food section? You want to answer that question. Well, if you've kept your accounting separate, you can tell how much you're making on things that are coming from the frozen food section. How much are we making on canned health food? Well, how much are we making on, our health food may include, what do you call it, like raw materials, you know, where you have a big bin of wheat or a big bin of soybeans that you're selling. That could be another zone, and the journal entry can be controlled by the zone, okay, where you're getting a different journal entry depending on the zone. That has to do with movements, and so we'll cover that next time. But I wanted to point out, they probably were over here in warehouses. Well, we can house that up. I bet you it's here. Okay, yeah, see, under accounts, all right, so we can set up it so the account, the location, the warehouse controls the journal entry. Okay, so if it came out of this warehouse, it goes into a different cost of goods sold account. It's in a different inventory account than if it's in a different warehouse. Okay, so each of these areas here, okay, warehouses, I'm positive it's over in groups, inventory zones, all three of these can control how the journal entry is made, what accounts are made in the journal entry. And then the most narrowest definition is inventory locations. Okay, inventory locations, you see, are like the shelf space, shelf numbers, and what they're doing here is like row L, bin A, shelf 1, okay? and you can name the zone if you want to, all right? When you set up a zone, let's just pick up this one. My favorite one is LB05, okay, let's pick that one up. All right, so because we have first set up the warehouse group, then we set up the warehouse, then we set up the zone, all three of those things are now available to be attached to a location, you see? So there's the warehouse code, okay? It is there and able to be gotten at because we set up all the warehouse locations first. Okay, remember seeing this a minute ago over in the warehouse screen. Okay, the zone is there because we first set up the zone. All right, and the location name is rack. Okay, and it hardly, you know, I think it might be useful, you know, to have sort of a generic name, but you don't have to put too much thought into the name. But you might want to name it a little bit on, you know, is it a rack or chiller 1, chiller 2, whatever you wanted to do with that. But it's fairly simple. So I hope that that was a little bit clear, okay, that we start on the outer circle here, getting these things set up, groups first, then the warehouse. If you did the warehouse first and then you wanted to form groups, you can, but then you would go back, you'd go here, then set these up, and then go back here. But if you had this very tightly organized mind, you'd set up your groups first, then you'd set up your warehouse, then you'd set up within the warehouse the zones, and then within the zones you'd set up your locations. And all of these feeding this, okay? Now, one of the things that we can mention about zones and warehouse is that these are two, I don't know how to describe, they're two categorization that you don't have to think that a zone is a subset of a warehouse. They're two different dimensions, okay, that you don't have to think of the warehouse as the outside of the building and then the zone is inside. That is, you can break free of that idea and say, I want my warehouse, I have all of the books out in the field and each of my call porters are a warehouse, and then a zone is going to be Spanish and English books, okay? Well, they're just two different dimensions of the same inventory, but they're not necessarily subsets. The zone is not necessarily a subset of the warehouse, okay? If that's what you want. Okay, now but you don't need to compress this thing too much because we have all kinds of stuff. Okay, so this would be sort of physical if you want to think of this as physical, but then you could go over here to order fulfillment, and we have product groups, which could be our Spanish versus, okay, our product groups could be. Here, you could see that we could have frozen health food, bulk health food, canned health food, Ellen White books, non-Adventist published books, evangelistic books, and so forth. So don't get too carried away with trying to do it all with a physical location, because we have the physical group here, okay, that we could set, the product group here that we could set up, and then we also have item characteristics, okay, and let's look at that. You see chilled, colored, frozen, language, you see, so we could have Spanish and English as a characteristic of the book, of the item. So we get all of that set up, And after we have set those up, we've got product group, item characteristics, and then the one important one is the units of measure labels. Okay, let's make sure we cover this. This is a very important one. All right, we sit here and we have units of labor labels. Okay, bottle. Okay, are we going to price this thing by bottle? Are we going to price it by box? All right, let me skip days for a minute. Each. How about a pallet? Okay, now those four make sense. All right, those four make sense. Everybody knows what a bottle is. Everyone knows what a box is. Everyone knows what each is in a pallet, right?
Yeah, so it will depend of the numbers or the type of product are you wanting to sell.
Yeah, now this is label, unit label.
Yeah. How
Okay.
you, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's how you can handle the inventory for that type of product.
That's right. And so, your inventory item may be steps to Christ.
Yeah.
And your inventory count is labeled. Your inventory count figure is the boxes of steps to Christ, not each. Okay.
Yeah.
So for that inventory item, you don't want them to count the boxes and multiply it times the number of books in the boxes. That inventory item is by the box. Okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. I'd like to still to come back in the way we would like to set the inventory. If I understand you, let me just repeat you so we can understand if we are on the same track.
Sure.
Okay. The first thing you need to set is a warehouse group.
Yeah.
Okay. And then after the warehouse,
right.
The warehouse group, you create the warehouse itself, each warehouse. For example, the easiest way for us to understand it maybe is in a case of Walmart, for example. If we have a group and then we have several warehouses of Walmart or Walmart, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we need to set in the third position the inventory zones. There I have some confusions. When you talk about inventory zones, maybe is it like when we talk about inventory zones, for example, the zone for clothing, the zone for tools, the zone for food? Is that what it is talking here?
Yeah, and let's just give it simple. Let me give you a simple answer. Okay, that think of inventory zones that way, that they are subsets of the warehouse or the location. So when it says warehouse, it actually doesn't need to be a warehouse. It could be a retail store, but
okay.
It's a subset of the warehouse. All right, and remember, the people that are going to go and pick the items and find the items in the warehouse have to, give them some breadcrumbs. Okay, you could just arbitrarily name A, B, and C, so they know where to go to start looking for the location. Whatever. Okay, and so the starting place is to think of the inventory zone as a subset of the warehouse. Okay?
Okay.
And then the locations are a subset of the zones.
Okay. And then after we set the locations.
Once you're settled with that, once you have it solid in your brain, then you can break it apart a little bit. A zone does not have to be a subset of the warehouse. It does not have to be, a location does not have to be a subset of the zones. maybe for tidiness, you want it, okay? Maybe for keeping your thoughts organized, you want it to be that way, but it isn't required. There are different dimensions of keeping track of the location.
So it is possible as well that we have inventory zone, and under the zone we have several warehouses, for example, for foods. And then
I wouldn't say they're just different. So you have inventory zones, and then you have different warehouse. No. Your warehouse groups, if you were probably do what you just described. You made it too complicated.
Okay.
I was going to make it so you don't. All I'm saying is you don't have to be as tightly thinking. A good example is our projects and dimensions on our transaction analysis. You know, our code, projects, and dimensions. I have heard people say that details was a subset of projects. Okay. Have you ever heard anyone say that? You know, like vehicles would be the project, and then the actual individual vehicle would be the details. You know, I've heard people say that about those dimensions. You know, but the problem is that's just not true. Okay, projects, the project dimension on our transactions can handle any one aspect of the transactions, and details can handle a whole different aspect of the transactions. They don't have to be subsets of each other.
And then after the inventory location, what shall we do? We go directly to the unit level?
Well, I would, before, you're trying to do this really mechanically. First off, I'm not that good at this to establish a mechanical process. So you're getting a little bit too, that we would probably try to come up with that. But I think the beginning thing before you start doing any of this is to sit down and really understand how the inventory needs to be managed on those three dimensions. You know, the physical nature of the asset, the inventory, the bookkeeping, and the sales information.
Okay.
And then make sure you capture them all someplace. You know. All right. And if you get it in the wrong order, it doesn't matter until you get a bunch of inventory in there. Okay. That is, if you create the locations first and then break them into zones, and then do the warehouse setup and then the warehouse groups in that order, until you started populating it with inventory, it doesn't matter really which order you do it. It might save you seconds of work if you do it in the right order, but it's too precise to say one has to be done before the other. It's only one has to be done before the other in a logical sense, but not in actual sense. Okay, so I would go over, your next question is I would then set up the groups that I want, and for sure you've got to have labels, okay? Labels, and then you could set up conversions, okay? All right, so let's not do conversions yet. All right, we have item characteristics, okay? Now characteristics are a whole different one. I think we looked at that. Chilled, color, frozen, evangelistic books, frozen health food, those sorts of things, okay? And remember when we did characteristics, let's open this one up. Frozen, okay? I think that's it. All right, so you notice here that you don't have an account tab like we had in warehouse. So what that would mean is that you cannot do bookkeeping by putting frozen into one inventory account and cost of goods sold account, and books in another cost of goods sold account, because they don't give you an account that governs that. Okay? So if you really wanted your frozen to be bookkeeping to be different than your books, you would have to set it up some other way. You'd have to set it up as a location, a warehouse, set it up as a zone. Okay, if you really wanted it separate, because over in zones, we had accounts. Over in characteristics, we did not have accounts. So you can't keep your account. If the characteristic is important to affect your bookkeeping, you don't want the characteristic over here. Does that make sense?
Mac.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is right with your agenda, but it could be have a briefly explanation how I link the item characteristics with the account in the zone code.
Well, I will tell you that is the hard stuff. This is not brief.
Okay.
All I can tell you is this. All right, let me just, I'm going to step away and I'm going to go.
Okay.
I'm going to do what you asked, but I want to go to my books here and see if I can't open. Let me just go over. I think I've got this as a PDF. I want to show you. Let's see what we got here. It's going to take me a minute to find the documents that were with inventory. I think this is it. Now, all these documents I have put on the Yammer site, okay? And I'm only just a few minutes ahead of you on this. So don't start thinking I have, I'm the expert on this. But I want to show you one little thing so I know it's confusing for you to look at, but the only way I could find it is to sit there and just flip. It's a picture. Okay. Oh, mercy. Can you see this? Are you seeing it okay?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I see.
All right, now, this is how the accounting is done. This is a confusing picture. I have intentions to, I had intentions before I showed it to you to simplify it a little bit. Let's see if we can get it here. All right. You want the movement to write the entry, and what controls the accounting? The movement controls the accounting, all right? And so first off, if you have an item, you can have the item control the accounting, okay? That is that the item, this is such a lousy picture, I'm almost sorry I'm showing it to you. But the item can tell you what accounts to use when you're bookkeeping the sale of that item. All right, did that make sense? The item itself. So we say the item is Steps to Christ in English. And when we set up that item, we can have the item control where the debit and credit go when we buy the item and then when we sell it. Okay, That is, that we can put all steps to Christ sales into a different entry, a different account. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That item, when I talk about different accounts, you remember we've got to do account, and then we've got to do fund, function, restriction, resource, details, and so forth. All of those 10 attributes and then account code would be 11. All of those can be controlled by the item, okay? But they can also be controlled by the movement, okay? You know how when we pick up a journal and a journal type, and we use a certain journal, it uses certain accounts? Well, the movement can be controlled, the accounting can be controlled by the movement itself. So when I open a certain movement, the debits and credits and the fund, function, restriction, and all can be controlled by that, okay? But it can also be controlled, but if it's not controlled by the item and it's not controlled by the movement, then it's got to be controlled by the business setup. The business setup is what we've been talking about so far, okay? So the debit and credit could be controlled by the what warehouse that it came from, what location it came from, or what zone it came from. Okay? Does that make sense?
Mac, but if it looks me all these different compartments are complementing each other. But if I define the debit and credit supposing item, or in the movement, or in the inventory itself, so they are excluding each other.
Right.
Okay.
They exclude each other, and they are a hierarchy. Okay. So if the item, you know, this is what this picture is trying to tell us, is that the item, if it's not one place, it goes to the next place to look for it. So let's say that I would like my items to be controlled in a certain, the accounting for an item sale to go into certain accounts and certain functions and so forth. But if it's not there, then the movement can do it, okay? And so you see where it says item master here, not defined, okay? That you haven't put in the account to use there on the item, then the movement can do it. And then if the movement doesn't do it, is not defined, then the business setup, the inventory business setup can do it. Okay, so how does it behave if you leave data out? You know, they off.
But if I am reading well, in the last instance that this inventory business setup, I can define automatically, or even in the when I am making the journal entry, because I am reading manual.
Right. Yep. And so now think about it. To me, if you can get by with the inventory business setup controlling your accounting, that's the best. That's the easiest. Okay? But if you can't get by with the inventory, you know, that basically says put everything into this account, everything from this warehouse goes into this account, everything from this zone goes into that account, and it's a macro thing. Well, the beauty of that then is you don't need to worry about them. If you can get by with your inventory business setup doing it, then you don't need to worry about your movement journal entry. This is the movement is like the JV. Okay, you don't need to worry about it there. Okay, and then because that's more work. Okay, because if you have 5 movements, you need to set up the 5 accounts you want it to go to. And if you can't get by with the movement, then you got to go all the way down to item. That is, every time you create an item, you got to put in the account you want debited and credited. Well, if you can get by with doing it at the top level, and your business problem, your business environment can get by doing it at the top level, and everybody's happy, it's sure a lot less work than doing it at the movement level, which is a lot less work than doing it at the item level. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so now we've done all the characteristics. I'm not going to go back to my handwritten picture, but we've done all of the peripheral stuff, all of the stuff, and set up the environment, and we're ready for the item master. Okay? And one big challenge that we have while we're using this is to get used to which of these. Oh, I forgot something I wanted to talk to you about. Units, labels. All right, so a minute ago. All right, a unit label, all of us understand a bottle, a box, each, and a pallet. Those are physical descriptors. Okay, a pallet is a bunch of boxes. A box is a bunch of individual items, eaches, bottles, and so forth. But one thing to keep in mind with the inventory system is that you can also use it to keep track of services. Now let this register on your brain a little bit. You can keep track of sold services and do your costing of sold services. Now we may never need it in the Adventist setup, but suppose we were doing a business where you sold the item and then you sold installation. Okay, you know, they could buy the item, but they could also buy installation. And we might say we're going to charge you $5 an hour for installation. Okay, so your inventory accounting does not have to deal with only physical items. It can include any other aspect of your business like consulting or installation or maintenance hours. You see that we're selling and we want to keep track of what to sell them for. We've got category, all these service labor type hours, service type things. We have attributes that we want to keep track of on them as well. You know, were they done by our top professional? Were they done by an entry-level technician? You know, we're billing out at different rates. You know, we want to keep track of all that. We want to be able to bill out at different rates. This will do it for us. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, good. Thank you. Okay, I got to keep going here. All I see is a screen. I feel like I'm talking into the deep blue sea. One of these days, your turn will come. All right. Yeah. So keep in mind that we can use the inventory system to keep track of services. It works the same. There's not a dramatic differences between selling and inventorying services and selling and inventorying physical goods. Okay, so a lot of new people new to inventories forget that service is an inventoriable. It might not show up on your balance sheet as a inventory item, but it definitely hits your cost of goods sold and your sales account. Can show up that way. Okay. All right. The second thing I wanted just to look at is right here, and this gets into an area that I'm not great at. But let's say we have boxes of steps to Christ, and we have individual items of steps to Christ. So we're using, for steps to Christ, we have boxes and we have each. Well, does that mean that we have to keep two separate inventory items for those that are at each and those that are in boxes? And the answer is no. It is one inventory item, but we have measurements of so many boxes of it and so many eaches of it. Well, in order to make all that work, we have to have a conversion. Okay? The standard unit conversions, okay? So here's a conversion. Let's see what we've got here, what this brings us up. All right? Let's see, I'm not an expert at this, but this shows you unit labels, each, okay? Well, anyway, I'm not sure. This has not been set up for us yet, okay? What this allows us to do is to say how many each are in a box, okay? So if we see that we have 50 boxes, how many steps to Christ is that? Okay, and we can have a warehouse count. We have a report that gives us our physical count in each, or gives us our physical count in boxes, even though some of them are in broken out, sitting there on the shelf separate, and some are in boxes. Does that make sense a little bit? Okay, and so that's all about delivery, and we're just about done. And so we go over here to item master, okay, and we have to figure out which ones we want to use of all these deals, but I'm just use this one, I believe, is the one I like. And so here we have the item itself. Okay, so if you say, I want to look up an inventory item, you would have come here to item master. And for our class purposes, we are going to use, my favorite is this one right here, GN3001. All right, that's my favorite, and so all of my class examples will be that. It has a lot of rich data there. So we go, okay, and now we have all about bringing all of this together. So if I don't want to go back and take the trouble of going back to my handwritten picture, but this, what we are looking at, is the center box of that picture. Okay, all of this other stuff has been fit around it. Okay, so we could light this up so you can see the product, the name, the item number, and the name of the item, and the short heading. We're familiar with all of that. The long description, and then we have the product group. Remember, we set this up earlier. Okay, and then the item type. Okay, this is a different dimension, item type. We never looked at it, but it works just the same. It's just different dimensions. We have we could put in the barcode number for our scanners and miscellaneous, and that takes care of general. Okay. And we have all this type of stuff over here. I don't completely understand, but do we want to serialize the item? If we check that, that means that every time we do an entry, it is mandatory for you to put in the serial number of the item that you're buying, and when you buy it, you can't record a purchase without recording also the serial number. You can't record a movement without moving it. And so clicking that really makes it where you're managing the actual item. And then we have batch control, which is similar. Okay, batch control isn't the item itself is serialized, but batch control is that the batch is serialized. So we get a shipment of medicine, okay, and it all expires on the end of March. Well, we want to control that batch, okay, so we are able to know that, so if we moved items from that batch, how do we stand on that batch? It's not, we don't care about the individual items, but we do care about the batch we received and its expiration date. And so if we move them from one warehouse to another, you know, what happened to that batch and how does it stand? Okay. And then the unit, the base unit amount, okay, the default location of the item, the default warehouse, and these are defaults because if we have more than one warehouse, they're going to all have this item maybe, okay, so we may not want to use the default or we can use, so if we're doing an entry, that will be the first one to show up. It's the default. It's not the actual warehouse that something is being placed in, but it just helps us with data entry, okay? And then we come down here and we've got purchase price, okay, where the data is being kept on the purchase price and the sales price, okay, what do we sell it for? Minimum sales quantity is 1 each. Well, we could have a minimum sales, okay. Who is the default salesperson of the item? The default sales price, the sales price of the item. And all of this is building the database, which is feeding my movements, okay? You know, so if I do a movement, I can have the sales price of the movement coming from here, okay? The sales, what do we sell it for, all right? And then what account codes, all right? So if I sell this item, what account should be debited and what account should be credited, okay? And that's a lot of trouble, and it brings us back to this picture here. So if the item is controlling the debit and the credit, then I would set it up here. Okay, this is the debit and the credit for the cost of goods sold and the inventory, and the debit and the credit for the sales amount. Okay, the selling of the item. All right, and so this is the most granular, and it's all the additional work. If you know, what account, it sounds good like you've got control, and still, instead of, it sounds good until you've got to set this up for every inventory item, and all of a sudden it doesn't sound so good anymore. But if you want control at the most granular inventory level, the item level, this is where you set it up, and you're here in the picture, up here at the top, okay? But what I was saying earlier is if you can get by letting your movement control your accounting, it's better than making it at the item level. If you can get by letting your business setup control it, it's better than doing it at the movement level, and it's better than doing it at the item level, okay? But this is the most granular, detailed level that you can have these your accounting being done.
Okay. So you mean that let's say I don't know anything regarding inventory yet. I am talking about the module. I can go right away to the item master and build everything from there.
Well, yeah. I mean, what would happen if you do it in the wrong order? Let's just look here at a real simple one. Okay? You're creating a new item. You're putting a new item in here under Item Master.
Okay.
And you're in a brand new business unit. Okay?
Okay.
So make sure you got this in mind. When you look at PK1, it looks nice, but everything's been set up for you. But when we're doing a new organization, everything's not set up. We've got a blank world, okay? So you would come over here and you say, all right, what is my default warehouse? And you would click that right there. You would click it, and you would have nothing here. So then you would run over, which is okay, it's not the end of the world. You'd run over here to warehouse and set up your warehouse, okay? You'd set up your warehouse to do that, and then you'd go back to the item master, and then you clicked it, and what you just set up would be there.
Okay.
You follow? So that's what I was trying to say. purely on a logical basis, you start on the outside of the circle and work in. On a practical basis, it doesn't really matter, really, what you set up first. Okay? The same would be true with a zone, a location. You see, all right, what location is the default location for this item? Okay? And you'd go create the location. That would be a pain in the neck to create a location every time you needed one individually. You need to upload all your locations at one time so they're there. So when you click here, you got something. Okay? Go ahead.
Since this is the most important, let's say, the most important functionality of the inventory, can you please explain it from tab to tab, from general till miscellaneous?
Well, I don't think I can. That would be logical and a good teaching, but I cannot explain it completely, but I would give it a shot. I don't know, you know. So you know what the item code is in the name of the item. The short heading, okay, you would need to develop a convention for the short heading and the lookup code and the long description, but that would be the type of thing you're used to, okay? Now you set up product groups based on earlier activity before you got to the scene. You set up product groups, okay? If you want groups, you come over here, okay? And product groups were right here, and you created the product groups you wanted, okay? Product groups can control your accounting because you see the tab, all right? So if you want your product groups to establish, you know, and so here are our product groups in PK1, all right? So you would set that up first, all right? And then when you're over here in Item Master, you would pick the group it belonged in. And if you wanted a different group when you got here, you'd run over there real quick and add that group. It'd be no big deal. And the same with item type. It's exactly the same thing, but different. They're not subsets of each other. They're just completely different dimensions. Okay? And there's a barcode number, so you get it in your reader set up. Okay? And
so a quick question regarding that one. Is the barcode number linked with the serialization of the object? For example, for the book. If a book has a serial number, because you told us not to take care of the serial number.
Right. So you may be confused about what a serial number is.
And the book number. ESPN.
A serial number is a separate number that is different for every item.
Okay.
All right, so probably there, I don't know anything about Madagascar, but at least in the United States, look on the windshield, right at the windshield, and there is a unique number for that car. No other car in the world has that number. That's serial number.
Okay.
All right. Now, when I go to the grocery store and buy Kellogg's Corn Flakes large box, it has another number on it, okay? Even though it is cereal, I did not intend this pun to happen, but even though it is cereal, Kellogg's Corn Flakes is cereal, that number that's on that box is not the serial number because it's not unique for that item. It's unique for that product.
Okay.
Okay, so when you look at the scanned numbers on boxes in the grocery store, those are not serial numbers. Those
so the
are
barcode. How it is generated with that barcode number?
Well, I mean, this is controlled by you, not by the software. Okay.
So can we put the serial number here or the ISBN in case of the book, so they can.
Well, the ISBN would be a good thing to put there.
Okay.
All right. The ISBN is the product number, not the serial number.
Okay.
Okay, so all from this publishing house, all books called Principles of Accounting will have the same ISBN number. Okay? All Principles of Accounting written by Mac Tennyson, the 5th edition, have the same ISBN number. But each individual book does not have a different number. Does that make sense?
So in the case of a publishing house, who is supposed to fill this barcode number if they want to use this one to scan all the books that is going out from their stores?
Well, you have the cart before the horse, or you're expecting too much from me. This software to handle the barcode. What the barcode is a business issue at the client.
Mm-hmm.
You got it backward. You got the cart before the horse.
Okay.
You see, so you walk in and they say, "Oh, this is our number coding system," and say, "Oh, well, let's put it here." Not the other way around. You buy a barcode reader, and it's ready to read barcodes, but you have to establish the codes that you want and how you want to use it. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So this is giving you a place to put the number and available for your barcode reading software, but the actual number, that's up to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Your business situation. Okay? And you can see they've got the NATO inventory number. That's not the right, yeah. So these are different features. There are different numbers floating around, but we don't need to worry about what these European article number and NATO inventory number or the commodity code. We don't need to worry about that. There's 4 fields of 4 numbers that we can keep data in, okay, about this item. But make sure you keep in mind that the item here does not mean an individual book. It means an individual type of book. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So don't get confused by the word item. All right, the item is really not item. It is all steps to Christ.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I understand now. I was confused in that part.
Yeah, so this is the category, this is the clump of all of the product that are exactly the same.
Okay.
Okay? And just for you can see here, we've got data access group where you can limit people to different access groups. Okay? If you want to. So they don't accidentally meddle in another inventory item. Okay? Receipt note. This is, let's see, I want to make sure we get it right because this is not like receipt of money. This is like receipt of the inventory when it is coming and being delivered. Okay, so you got the word receipt being used twice in the accounting system. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
One, when it talks about money, but this is not the receipt of money. This is the receipt of the item. And what has to be done, okay, to show that we've received it. All right, a little bit beyond me. Here is we're able to keep track of a serial number for the item. Okay, that is for each individual item, each car. We're going to keep track of the serial number of each car. And so if you click that, it means that every one of them, every time you do a journal entry, you've got to also put in the serial number of the thing you bought. The system keeps track of the inventory. You can print your inventory by serial number. And then when you sell it, you have to enter or move it or sell it, you have to enter the serial number of the item you sold. So this would work like on cars.
Bueno.
Right? Did Siri leave? I tell you. Are you
No,
guys
I am
there?
here.
Okay. Sounded like you left. All right.
No.
And batches are not serial numbers. Okay. A batch is a group of similar items that you've got to keep track of them by batch. Okay. So when you buy 30, you get a delivery of 30 of a certain kind of pill that with an expiration date, then you'd want to use batch control so you're able to say where did those items go as a batch. And so every time you buy or every time you sell one of those items, you have to identify what batch is being sold so you know how you stand not only on inventory item in the largest sense, but also the individual batch. How many do we have left of these pills that expire on this certain date? Okay, you don't have to create a separate inventory item batch. Okay, that would drive you crazy. But you do need to keep track of the batch and how you stand on selling the batch, and that's what that's for. Okay, this is giving you defaults. All right, so base item each and where it's located. And so this is what's going to show up when you're doing a movement entry. The default will be populating that and can be changed, you know, so you can sell it by the case or by the box. It's there. Okay. You could sell it by the box or case or whatever, but when you sell it, you want the default will populate the movement. All right.
Is it if we have a different location ID, will it mean that I need to create another item code as well?
This is really important that you know you don't do that. Okay, you don't do that. It just sort of defeats the whole purpose. No, this is only the default. So when you do a movement, and you're doing a movement, and the movement is a receipt of the goods being shipped in, you have to put down the location. Where are you putting this item? The default will be there on the form to help you. But if it's not that is not going to the same location, then you would change it to where you are putting it. Does that make sense? Yeah, so this is purely default. It is not the location of the item. It is the default that shows up when they ask you where are you putting it or where are you taking it from. Okay?
But let's say in a case where I received the GPS mobile phone, but I have two different warehouses I want to send them in London and let's say in Paris.
Right.
So when I capture the first receipt, when I receive the item, is there a way to specify that this is going to London and this is going to Paris?
Yes. All right, so the answer is yes. When you record a receipt, you have to say what location and what warehouse did it go into. Now, let me say that you have to if you set it up. You don't have to use these dimensions if you don't want to. Okay? So if you don't want to keep track of the location or the warehouse, you don't have to. But if you're using it, then you have to enter it when you receive it. Where in the warehouse is this going? What warehouse is it going to? So you've got a form that you've got to fill in, okay, indicating what location are you putting this received inventory into. Well, the default that you're seeing on the screen here will be there ready for you.
Okay.
It's there ready for you to just click post, and the receipt is posted. But if you've got to change it, then you can change it. So the default here on this part of our screen setup is controlling what shows up in a movement as the default. but it doesn't mean that it is got to go there. Okay, you can change it. Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right. Now this inventory allocation, this part is very important here. Inventory allocation is how are we going to take things and move them from my inventory to my cost of goods sold.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, one way I can do it is manually. Okay, manually. That is, when I am taking it out of inventory and putting it in cost of goods sold, I can pick the items in inventory and move their cost to cost of goods sold. Well, I don't think that's going to happen too much. You know, that we usually don't pick the items to move it over to cost of goods sold. Maybe if we're talking about diamond rings and cars, but on books, we want some assumption to happen, and so we could do automatic allocation, and we could do FIFO, the first in, first out. The first items that were bought are the first ones that are sold, okay? And this is more than, we're not talking about the physical movement of the items. We're talking about the movement of the cost.
Okay.
So the cost of the first items that we bought will be the costs that are moved to cost of goods sold first. It doesn't make any difference what's happening to the physical items.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This one item, this second thing down here, inventory count, is how we can keep track of how often the items are counted. If you wanted to control the frequency, this is for inventory count, to make sure you still have the stuff in inventory, because bookkeeping is going to break down, the workers are going to mess up, and so they are going to take things, and so we every once in a while have to count to make sure that that we really have the stuff. So how often do we want to count it? Well, that can be controlled at the item level, but it can also be controlled at the warehouse level or at the zone level, okay? We want to do a physical count of all of our expensive books every month, but of our low-priced Christian goodies, we might only do a physical count once a year. So we could control it at the warehouse level, at the zone level, or even at the item level. And this right here sets it, if we're controlling it at the item level, we can set here how often it needs to be physically counted. Okay? Purchasing, who do we normally buy it from? Okay? What are our normal maximum order quantities? Okay? How do we normally buy it? Okay, you normally buy it maybe at cases. So this is different. The unit of sale, the unit in our inventory could be different. Okay? Then we might buy it in a case and we may hold it in inventory for each. Okay? Here's minimum order quantity. Most of you probably studied that in school. Minimum order quantity where, you have a certain amount. What is the amount you should buy to be most cost effective because of the shipping and the volume discounts, and you calculate out what would be how much you would order every time you make an order. Okay, so here's maximum and here's minimum, and you never order more than that, and you would order always at least that amount, the minimum order quantity. Are you getting tired?
Sorry. in case of a book we were discussing, how do we define, for example, is it possible to sell books using unit of purchase by each and then unit of purchase by box?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So we specify it as well during the sales.
Right. And that conversion that I showed you a few minutes ago and sort of stumbled around with, that's how to keep it straight. So if you mark you're selling, if you're keeping your inventory by each, and then you sell a box, and you put box down on the sales movement, then it relieves the inventory based on each. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Purchase price, all right? All right. And then you can have this purchase price being updated by the order or by the invoicing, okay? Right now, we've got a purchase price. So when we make the entry, moving it from cost of goods sold, from inventory to cost of goods sold, it's got to have a purchase price somewhere. The price of the item to move. And so this is controlling the purchase price that is going to be used by the system. Okay? We can set up analysis codes for the item. Okay? So not only do we have the analysis codes in like the transaction codes of fund, function, restriction, TFWW, details, project, we can have the same structure here for the items. So you want to have a code that talks about a certain attribute of the item and so forth. All right, now, one of the things I'll mention to you, I want to make sure, you guys haven't fallen asleep, have you? Roll call vote here. Let me go back. Wake up, he's coming back to the classroom.
Yeah, David is aware that you are coming.
Uh-oh. Everybody's aware. All right. For 1 second, okay? All right, let me just mention to you something really important. All right? When, what have we lost everybody?
Oh, we're here.
All right, David, this is most important for you. All right, good. All of you coming back. All right, good. All right. Yeah, this is important. Our journal entry requires fund, function, restriction, and resource. Okay? We have to pass those characteristics from something in inventory to the journal entry. All right? That is, we can't just set, as far as I could tell, we can't just default all those to one fund, function, restriction, and so forth. So if we, for example, want to keep track of inventories by departments and have revenue, so the revenue, the sales entry and the cost of goods sold entry coming from the inventory system has to have a function. What department? So the important thing is that over in inventory, we have to put down the department. Okay? Every entry in our accounting side has to have a fund. So we have to somewhere over in the inventory side have the fund that the item is going to make entries against. So, does that make sense? So we're ending up, I mean, I know it's a little bit confusing, but we could easily end up with these codes here being fund, function, and restriction, and resource. So when we're making the entry for this item, it knows what fund, function, restriction, and resource to use when it makes the entry. All right? It doesn't happen automatically. You've got to pass from one set of analysis codes to the transaction analysis codes in order for this thing to work.
Mark, are you still sharing your screen?
No, I'm just sharing my face. Can you see it? I can't see your face at all. Yeah, so I'm not sharing my screen right now because I wanted to make sure all of you were awake on that one fact.
Okay, let me ask this. Is there a way we can can we link a journal type to this? Said that on the journal type, we can now link the journal type with a preset and define the fund function restriction we want to assign to this.
Yeah. So what, I don't want to answer the question because you're into an area that is my weakest part. When it comes to recording an entry, a movement that goes all the way over to the JV, that's my weakest thing. The part we're talking about today is my strong point. Okay? And a movement, if you say write a movement where I'm moving the inventory from this shelf to another warehouse, I'm good at that. Where you run into the worst problem is when you have a movement that has to make a JV. And every duck needs to be lined up there or the JV doesn't happen. Okay? So I'm recording a sales movement, which has got to make a sales JV. Debiting cash, crediting sales, debiting cost of goods sold, crediting inventory. I want that to happen with this one sales movement. Well, that is the boogeyman that we've got to develop an expertise on. Okay? To make a movement where I move an inventory from one item to another is not a problem. It's where I've got to have everything that the system needs so it can make that journal entry. Is the challenge. Okay? So I don't know if I answered your question completely.
Yeah.
The main answer is I don't know all about that.
Okay, but I just want to ask, for curiosity's sake, I'm just thinking, did you see anything like when a sales is done, does it post directly to the ledgers or
yes,
it will be?
Yes. So when I fire off a movement, it asks what inventory item have I sold, how many did I sell, you know, and then I hit something like post, it will make a JV if I have it set up right. And the JV will have its own journal type.
Okay.
If I have it set up right.
Okay.
And I will tell you that it's a lot more complicated than my simple little statement right there. Okay, because it's got to get the right account numbers, and it's got to get it from the right place, and it's got to have all the fund function and restriction that we have as mandatory over in the accounting side. It's got to be fed everything it needs, or it just sits there and says, nope, I'm not making this journal entry. You know, which is what we want. If we've required fund function, restriction, and resource, we don't want the inventory side making entries that doesn't have fund function and restriction, you know.
Sorry.
So this movement discussion is going to be done on another day, right?
Another day.
Okay.
Yeah, our next meeting will be on movements, and so I think we're getting a little tired. I want to show you one more thing, and then we are done. Okay.
Dr. Mark.
Go ahead.
I saw where we put the cost of the items and where we put the selling price. When there's going to be sales tax or value-added tax component to the selling price, is there a way we can capture that in the system?
Yeah, yes. The answer of that is this thing is very European. So value-added tax and sales tax, American concept, you know, are all there. All right, and so that's sort of one of the things we have to master. But keeping them separate is probably the first thing we've got to talk about at the next, because we want, just to give you a sense, we buy something that we're going to resell. We have shipping, the cost of the item, and the tax on the item. We have to make a decision how much of that detail do we want to keep in the inventory system. All right, so do I want to be able to show my total inventory and then broken down by those 3 items? Okay, and then when I move them to cost of goods sold, do I want to maintain those 3 characteristics over in cost of goods sold? So for all of my cost of goods sold, am I able to say, this is what I paid for the item, this is what I paid for shipping, and this is what I paid for value-added tax? You see? And now, back on the publishing house, on a publishing house, we have a certain amount that we pay for the copyright from the author, royalty to the author. We have the amount that we paid for editorial rewriting. We paid for the printing of the, the layout of the item. We paid for the printing of the item. Okay, do we want to keep those details in our inventory? So for our inventory, we're able to say for our inventory, this is how much that we've spent on each of those details. And then the next question is, do we want those details to pass to our cost of goods sold? So when we're done, we're able to say, of our sales, this amount went to royalties, this to our editor, our writers, this is the amount what went to our editors, this is the amount that went to pay for layout, and this is what we paid for printing. You know, and so and value added tax if we want to, do that. That was probably more than you wanted to hear. All right, so let me show you one more thing, and then we'll knock off. Is that all right? I don't want to end without you knowing about this. So Siri, I did not get through all of your items. Okay?
Okay.
But I think you can.
No problem.
And now there's one little thing left I want to show you, because we did item master, and if you don't know about this one little thing, it takes a lot of the fun away. Okay? And I've got to hunt for it. It's under order fulfillment. Let me look at inventory. Inventory inquiry. So we have set up all these attributes. We set up the items. We bought the items. We want to see how, I want to find out how many of the items do I have. Okay? And so now we have these 4 forms that we've got to learn which one we like. So let's just go to basic. Okay? We'll make the form just like we want. And so here is the item code, okay? And this is now dealing with the number of items we have, okay? So we go to our European one. All right, here, 301.
Sorry, just before we go there, what is the difference between a night time here and the details that we put in the dimension for the analysis codes?
Say again.
You see, in the old way, when we post the inventory, we just debit or credit the 1/6 account, and then we always tag it with a function to tell which department that inventory belongs to, and then we tag it by the details. The details is the item itself. So if we use the inventory system are we still using the details, or we can skip that one and?
No, you're not still using the detail. This is replacing all of that, but over on the item itself, okay, on the item itself, if you want to keep a item by a function,
Details.
yeah.
So the details is,
so
we
the
don't need anymore.
analysis codes here would be where you would keep track of the function that owns that item, okay? But
Okay.
the item that you're used to having in details, that is the item code, okay?
Okay.
All right.
So no longer need of the details.
Yeah, that thing you know about, that's like a homemade thing that we put together to bypass this inventory system.
Okay.
Okay, and it was just fine. It's something Andrew invented, where he was using the fixed asset register as the inventory manager. Okay, all right. So the last thing I want to show you is real simple. Is this thing here, because if you want to be able to see when you've done something, you want to see your inventory number going up and down. You know, so when you get over to practicing doing a receipt, you want to see, did my inventory count go up? Did I actually effectively record a receipt of an item? Okay, so you can't see that over where we just were on the items. You see it over here by doing an inquiry. Okay, so most of the time you spend an inventory inquiry. That's where a lot of action is in our work, because you're wanting to see, did my inventory count change because of this movement I did? You know, I made a movement, I ran the movement, did it really change? Did my inventory go down because I had a sale? Did it go up because I had a receipt? Did my location change because I moved it physically from one warehouse to another? So here is this GPS. Okay, we go okay. All right, and so here you can see that we have 483 of them in London. Okay, that's the warehouse, that's the location. Okay, so if we had more some in our other warehouses, they would be listed here by the warehouses they are in. Okay, and then, all right, and so this is the number that we have on hand. 3 of them are still on hand in the warehouse, but they have already been attached to a sale. So if you go do this is an important concept. So if you go do the physical count, you should be able to count 483 of them sitting on the shelf. But if you're wanting to answer the question, how many can I sell? You know, somebody wants to buy 483, we'd say, no, we can only sell you 480 because 3 have already been attached to a sale. They just haven't been picked yet. Okay, the people that are picking them. So you could imagine this. You've sold something. You want it to be there when it gets picked. So it's got to be allocated somehow or another so it's not showing on hand. And the salespeople don't accidentally sell something we've already sold just because it's sitting on the warehouse. You know, I don't know how to explain this. I don't want to get carried away with it, but just imagine this. We have 500 sitting on the shelves, and so some person physically walks back and looks at it and sees 500, and so he sells 500. But 10 of them have already been sold. They just haven't been picked yet. So to avoid that problem, we have the allocated, which have been sold, but they haven't been picked. So they're still on the shelves, but they are allocated to a transaction already. Is that clear enough? Okay. Now,
Yes.
another thing I can do, besides allocating it, I can reserve it, okay? I have someone inquire of me and says, can you give me a price on 50? Can I buy 50 of these things from you? And you say, yes, here's the price, and you have 4 days to respond and accept it. The price is good, and we can deliver it if you commit to the 4 days. We have enough. So then you would want to reserve it. There's not been a sales transaction. The allocated is coming from a movement order, okay? A movement has said we've sold it, but it hasn't gone yet, okay? A reserved is we're reserving it, okay? So we have 483 on the shelf, and 3 of them here are attached to a sales invoice that they haven't been picked yet, but they have been sold. And then whatever number is in here would be if someone had reserved it, saying you can't sell these items. I have a pending deal that I got to have these items so you don't accidentally sell them. Does that make sense? And so this quantity available is the amount that someone could sell if they wanted to. Okay. Now, all right, and then we have, so that's current inventory, and this is where they are. So Siri, you see we have 1 inventory item in 2 locations. All right?
Okay.
You see, so you have as many locations as you want, and you have the quantity on hand there. Okay? And then of the ones in these locations, where are they allocated from? So 3 of these 480 have been allocated.
What's the difference
well,
between
this
allocated
right
and
here, it's a little
reserved?
confusing. This 3 is not the allocated. This 3 is the allocated. This is in just a different inventory item, location. It's in the inspection location. So the items have come in, they've been booked into the system, but they are being inspected before they go on the shelf for sale. So they're in the inspection location. So this 3 and this 3 are unfortunately the same number, but they are 2 different meanings. They're 2 different things. Okay, then you could go over here to historical transactions. Okay, you're seeing none. This is going to show you all of the historical transactions. You come here and you click that, and I think you got to go okay. Yeah, so you're able to see all of the history. So when we are practicing writing journal entries, we are going to want to make sure that inventory gets relieved. We will come over here to see the historical transactions. Did the inventory really get reduced because we sold it? The historical transactions look backwards. Projected transactions look forwards. Okay, so if we have a purchase order out for the item, okay, the purchase orders out for the item, I don't know if we have any here. The purchase orders out will show up here, showing our salespeople that we have something available. Okay, so that these are projected transactions are going to happen in the future. Okay, does that make sense? So historical shows us what happened in the past. The illustration isn't working too good because the database is so old, but the projected transactions are things that are there. You can see them over here, okay? The quantity available, and then we add the projected transactions, so we add the projected sales, so we're able to come up with what will be the projected amount available for our wheeling and dealing and selling our inventory. Okay, so I think that's enough for today. I think we've been at it for quite a while now. I've lost track of time. Like all
Dr. Mark,
Uh-huh.
how do we get to have the projected? What is informing the projected the
Well,
figures?
I don't know that. That's an excellent question, but I haven't messed with it too much, but I believe it is connected to the sales and purchase orders, sales and purchase order. Now, the sales, just to let you know, the purchase order and the sales are very complex steps, which if you're on, there are multiple steps that you're going through when you make a sale, the bookkeeping and the processing of the sale. So you've recorded a sale, which is a projected, but it hasn't been allocated out of inventory yet, because we control when it gets allocated out of inventory. So we can tell it to project, to record it in the projection, but not allocate it yet. Why we'd want to do that, I have no idea. Why we'd ever do it. But we control when something gets allocated out of inventory and when it gets marked as a projection. Okay? And one thing that we need to be clear on is that the projection, okay, one thing we got to be clear on is that the projection, excuse me, the word allocated is different than the word we use over in accounting.
Ay, está para cantar, papá.
Is that you, Siri? You being sweet to your little child? That's good. All right. So allocated means that we're taking things out of inventory. Okay. In the inventory session, allocated means that we have attached a item of inventory things to a transaction. Okay. So we've said these things belong to this transaction. That's what we mean by allocated. Wow. You guys wore me out. Are you still with me? I see some of you. I see I got Daniel and Eddie, all of you doing great. Well, now the next question we got to ask is, what's our next step? Do you want to do this again next week? Do you want to play with it some?
Oh yeah, it would be great to test in our VM while you are explaining again some examples, some good example. Every one of us playing here, you know.
Yeah.
Trying to setting up maybe one item with categories, you know, and so on.
Yeah. So why don't we have an assignment that you guys will play with the inventory, create a new warehouse, create, you know. And one of the things you can do, by the way, one of the things you can do is that, you know, part of you says, I want a blank one, a blank business unit that I can start creating these things in so I can practice. But you can set up a new warehouse, you can set up a new item, you could set up a new zone. You can almost set up a parallel world that is different than PK1. You know, you don't have to go out into a complete blank one. You just create things that are new for everything. Set up your new warehouse, create 4 zones in that warehouse, create, you know, so just pretend that you are now setting up a Christian bookstore with health foods and all that, and just make everything new, but leave all of their old stuff there, and it will work just fine. Okay.
So different. You mean different PK1, right?
Yeah. So inside of PK1,
okay,
you could say within PK1, you could say, I am going to ignore what they have and set up a Christian bookstore.
Yeah.
You see. And so your categories will be there with their categories, and your zones will be there with your zones. But in fact, when I practice, I put MT in front of all my names. Okay, so I know they're ones I set up.
Mm-hmm.
So I set up a new warehouse and put MT in the name. And I set up a new zone and put MT in the name, and set up a new items and put MT in the names, and just do everything so it's all. And when we make movements, it's simple to make their movements work,
Mm-hmm.
but to make your movements work is hard. And so if you can set up, so when you create a movement, you name it, and you're able to always go back to yours and not be confused by theirs, and
Okay.
yeah. So do you guys want to try to do this again sometime, or what do you feel? I need a little bit of feedback.
Oh yes, it will be great to
That
make
would
it
be
again.
great.
Yeah.
All right, should we do it at 9 o'clock next Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so that's 9 o'clock my time. Not 9 o'clock Vimba's. How do you say that, Vimba?
Did you say Tuesday or Thursday?
Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, so Tuesday at 9 o'clock, Washington time.
Okay.
Will be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
And we'll pick up, and next time we'll talk about movements. And I promise you, when we talk about movements, I know a lot less. So you saw me stumbling around with the items I went over today. The movements are a lot harder. They are very hard because it's simple to do a movement from one shelf to another shelf. It's hard to fire off the JV, to get the JV to work right. And so I'm going to have to practice between now and then.
Okay.
All right, so thank you guys and ladies, gentlemen.
Mike?
For your time. Really
Mike?